Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art in Bentonville, Arkansas owns and occasionally displays as part of their permanent collection a grouping of prints whose dates of creation range from the late 19th century to the early to mid-1940s. Many of the prints feature images which are of a political nature, some intended to glorify the advent of the factory, while some set out to demonize the ways of budding capitalist America. The aforementioned works are the primary focus of this presentation and will be discussed in light of the thoughts on mimesis and art in general held by Plato and Hans Gadamer. As part of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, which was formulated in order to aid with recovery from the Great Depression, programs designed to provide employment for artists were created. In 1935, the newly formed Works Progress Administration employed around 250 printmakers in the Graphic Arts Division of its Federal Art Project. These artists created approximately 250,000 prints, of which many were sent by the government to be used in public institutions such as schools and libraries. Once World War II began in 1939, many of the artists that had been working for the Federal Art Project committed to creating propaganda posters to be used throughout the nation and on military bases. Many of the artists were proud of the images they created for their nation and reported feeling a sense of camaraderie working alongside each other. Others became increasingly radicalized in their work. Of her work, Merchants of Death, Mabel Dwight wrote the following: "The profiteers are hardy, long-lived, and of eel-like surface. Accusing fingers may be pointed at them, but they are not sensitive. Only bayonets make them quiver, and they think that they control the bayonets, but they seldom realize that death is their leader. He loves them, for sooner or later they will fill his coffers. He knows that they are breeders of wars and revolutions." This print is strikingly different when paired with works such as William Larkin's Factories, a precisely rendered image of a factory devoid of human influence. Examples of both production work and work which was meant to incite the viewer are included throughout the presentation. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato held the view that the body and intellect are two separate entities, and that those worldly matters which involve the body should be largely ignored in favor of developing the intellect. Divided further is the intellect, known as Plato's account of the tripartite soul, which is described as a charioteer being pulled this way or that by two unruly horses, spirit and appetite. Plato felt like art of any sort had potential to influence the people of a city-state for better or for worse, and that art which influences individuals or communities towards the ideal would be the only sort of acceptable art. Art which sways one's emotions towards lust or grief would be detrimental to one's efforts to maintain a strong sense of intellect, and in turn likely have a negative effect on the polis. How does Plato think we should acquire this sense of the ideal? In Plato's philosophy, the ideal existed before the real. If this is the case, why doesn't a baby know that if touched, the flame of a candle will burn the hand that reaches for it? Plato states that anything we may not know regarding the way the world really is, we simply have not recollected yet. For each thing that exists in the world, there is an ideal form of it residing in Plato's heaven. In the Republic, an example of a bed is given. The form of the ideal bed exists in this place, removed from the world. For each thing there is but one form or essence. When a carpenter makes a bed, he is making a copy of the bed and has knowledge of how a bed must be in order for it to resemble the bed. Painting of a bed, though, is described as being an imitation of an imitation. In section 596d, in Book 10 of the Republic, Socrates and Glaucon converse on the topic of the nature of mimesis. Socrates says, "Tell me, do you think that there's no way any craftsman could make all these things? Don't you see that there is a way in which you yourself could make all of them?" "What way is that?" Glaucon says. "You could do it quickly and in lots of places, especially if you were willing to carry a mirror with you, for that's the quickest way of all. With it you can quickly make the sun, the things in the heavens, the earth, yourself, the other animals, manufactured items, plants, and everything else mentioned just now." Glaucon replies, "Yes, I can make them appear, but I couldn't make the things themselves as they truly are." This response satisfies Socrates, as he is trying to show that things made through imitation aren't true to the thing at all. Plato's Socrates says that imitation consorts with the part of us that is far from reason. It would seem that any sort of art which is not representative of Plato's ideal is likely to corrupt us and cause us to lose the self-control which keeps us from being led around by passion. Watching the guests who pass through the Art Under Pressure exhibition, a sense of loss and sorrow is unavoidably felt. Many people who view these images become visibly sad, some even shedding a few tears. By this, it would seem as if many of the works in the Art Under Pressure exhibition would be seen in a negative light by Plato. Should they be rejected as valuable to individuals and communities, though? These images raise social awareness and in turn could motivate individuals to act in a way which brings positive change to a community. Rather than discount art as mere instances of imitation which could lead to a subject or group of subjects astray, it is possible to consider the amalgamation of factors at play which make up the being of an artwork. Hans Gadamer's approach to aesthetics suggests that rather than being removed from the static ideal from which the work imitates, art actually adds to the reality of the topics which an artwork addresses. Gadamer's hermeneutical approach, in which the meaning of the work of art develops over time as the result of a heap of experiences, describes art as something which fosters experiences in the persons seeing the art that are as vital to the being of the artwork as the work itself. Each time the artwork brings a spectator into play by causing that person to lose themselves in the experience of taking an image on a canvas as seriously as winning a game of checkers, the meaning of the artwork is advanced that much further. Gadamer does not intend to imply that art should be treated with the lack of seriousness one can associate with the idea of playing a game, however. He intends that art should be approached with the seriousness of someone who gives their all in order to win a game, or that of a doctor who becomes absorbed in her practice. For Gadamer, viewing art should be approached as a practice rather than an opportunity to escape reality or be consumed by pleasure. In becoming affected by an artwork and submitting to the fact that the subject is always participating as a member of a plurality, one forgets oneself and becomes a part of the emerging meaning of the work of art. The intent is that rather than having a personal experience in which only the subject and art object exist, the viewer has a chance to both grow as an individual and contribute to the meaning of the work as a result of experiencing the art from a socially aware standpoint. I think this viewpoint has particularly important implications for some of the works in question. Plato might see only emotionally charged grief, a sign of weak will, in an image of men fearfully clinging to life as they die in a coal mine. He may suggest that to attempt to depict the form of death, which there surely must be one in his Platonic heaven, is to get it all wrong. Mere imitation designed to lead otherwise strong-willed men astray. Maybe Socrates would think that these men were simply cowards who forgot that their souls would continue on after departing from the body. This viewpoint is narrow and presupposes the existence of an afterlife that I see no substantial proof of. Gadamer's suggestions on how elements of art come together to form meaning for works of art are a breath of fresh air in comparison. Rather than seeing weakness and misrepresentation of an invisible ideal, the practice of art invites us to look at what fellow minds have placed before us and be part of it. Understand that when you look at a work of art, an experience that no other has had is taking place, and all the while know that it is an experience which rests upon the culmination of all experiences which came before it, and acts as a part of the foundation for experiences which others who follow will have. The idea that the history of each work is carried through time and built upon by experiences of it is inescapable and at times haunting. Consider Road from the Shore by Benton Spruance. When this work came out, a certain set of circumstances were present. The discovery of oil was still rather fresh. Opportunities to make one's fortune by finding it were still ripe. Now think of what this work must mean today. What would happen to our community if overnight the gas pumps ran dry? Things would change very quickly for us. To see this artwork and consider some of the events that have come to pass between the time of its creation and now are chilling. To look upon the images of anonymous laborers working in unison or in isolation to produce the things that we love helps us see that certain things which steer our lives have troubled us since the start, such as capitalism. Oftentimes we forget that the shirts on our backs, as well as most products purchased in America, were likely made by an underpaid laborer in a faraway land. When we use our beloved iDevices, we often are unaware of or simply ignore the fact that some parents may have to explain to their children the reason that some buildings, dormitories for factory workers, have strange yellow nets affixed to the outer perimeters in order to break the fall of Foxconn workers who attempt to clock out for good. Regardless of whether the factory's suicide rate is lower than the national average in China, this is something most of us would never dream of encountering in our American lives. The issues that these prints portray are real, and their significance continues to grow with each concerned gaze which falls upon them. Even those who quickly pass through the exhibition because the images seem to make them uncomfortable or cease to be aesthetically tasty contribute to the meaning of the image. As I stare into the eyes of this mysterious being, and encounter only the reflection of the molten materials of his labor process, I feel a sense of loss for individuals who have been absorbed into the world of the anonymous laborer, who work until death as a slave to the dollar. Seeing these events occur time and time again, raising awareness of the world we live in could help us all. Looking outside oneself to see the others existing in concert to form the entirety of being seems much more beneficial for both individuals and communities than adhering to an invisible and inaccessible set of ideals which await my recollection, while ignoring unpleasant ways of thinking because they might unravel all of the hard work I've put into developing my intellect. The meaning of the work is not existent in a way which can be defined, within it or in an ideal form of what it represents. Rather, aspects of the meaning are revealed and concealed as time goes on, forming an inexhaustible array of possible meanings.